Welcome to Mining the Media, providing nuggets of news and cutting-edge questions and answers, minus the political blather. Here are your hosts, G.K. Allen and Dave Jeffers.
Welcome to part 2 of Rod Martin's interview on Mining the Media.
You can turn these things around very quickly if there's a critical mass of will among the people. So I would suggest, obviously, from my point of view, one of the things we most need is a great awakening in this country. We need people to know Jesus Christ. We need to return to biblical values, among which are, here's a crazy thought for Joe Biden, not only shall you not steal, you shall not even think about it. That's pretty basic. And all of the great nations in the world are pretty much built on some variant of that. But also, an understanding that Christianity applies to far more than just your interpersonal relationships, which is why I went there. It's, things like God's admonition to Samuel when the people are calling for a king in 1 Samuel chapter 8, and this is paraphrasing, but God says, well, he'll be a tyrant. He'll tax you as much as the tithe. Well, heck, I'd love to have just a 10% tax rate. That'd be fantastic. And in thing after thing after thing, the Bible demonstrates a clear pathway to liberty that is unmatched. And when they were faithful in those things, that country became one of the great empires of the ancient world and vastly wealthy, unbelievably wealthy, such that silver was as nothing in Jerusalem. It was like unto paving stones. And then as they became more tyrannical, Rehoboam basically tries to reduce the 10 northern tribes to slavery. And of course, everything comes unstuck. And that's what we're seeing with Biden and Harris. We're seeing the reduction of everybody to a state of sort of a comfortable servitude. And that
it's a funny thing, Rod, about Joe Biden. Dave has heard this. You're hearing it for the first time. My late mother-in-law worked in the Carter White House. Hodding Carter was her boss. She was a fantastic person in organizing offices.
GK,
things that had to get done.
GK, you said Hodding Carter, right?
Yeah, she was in the Carter White House. Her boss within that organization was Hodding Carter.
Mm-hmm.
After Carter lost, she wound up working for a congressman from Texas years and went back and forth in San Antonio and Washington. Early 1980 or so, I remember her telling me how creepy Joe Biden was and how the women in the office felt slimed when he was around. And we're talking 1980, 1982 there, a long time ago. I really do believe that Joe Biden is mentally deranged. Serious when I say that, and not just because he's old and getting a little bit senile or whatever, but I think morally he's been bankrupt for a long, long time.
Yeah, he's really a bad person, and
yes,
Kamala Harris is a truly bad person. And that's self-evident. I mean, my gosh, we're supposed to believe that this man won 80 million votes. Did you see his rallies? 12 people show up. Did you see his ratings on his sort of State of the Union? I mean, Trump is getting like 40 million viewers every single year. Biden's getting 11. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Everybody can see this emperor has no clothes.
Well, Dave? I want to get back to what you said about the foundation, the biblical, we need a reformation, or we need a great awakening. And you talked about Israel and how they slaved their way or tyrannized their way to their extinction. In my first book, and this is where the Bible is instructive, what you were talking about, I actually made the biblical case in my chapter on economics for the free market system. It's a biblical concept that you do good, you work for your family, you provide a good or a service that somebody wants to pay for, and you're not doing harm to anyone, you're actually doing good. But when it comes to where my heart is in all this, and I know we're going places where I didn't think we were going to go, but that's okay. That's why we do this show. When the church talks about revival, I think too many people in the pew think about the lost people. That's not revival, that's evangelism. Revival is something that was once alive coming back to life. And that's we who describe ourselves as followers of Jesus Christ need to get out of the entertain me, bless me, joy boy preaching, motivational type preaching. And like at my church, where my pastor and our staff, they preach the word of God unashamedly, unapologetically, unvarnished, and our church is growing. We opened our doors as soon as we knew it was safe to. We had the largest level of giving, and we don't preach on giving. Pastor never preaches on giving. He thanks people for tithing, but he never preaches on it. He preaches on being right with the Lord. And our church has grown. We have turnover of about 14% every year because we have a lot of military. But our church has grown. And it's because people are hungry for the truth. And this is our heart for this podcast that we have. That's why we bring people on like you, because we know you're going to tell us the truth. You have lots of knowledge. You're not going to give us political blather. We're not going to shy away from politics. We're going to tell the truth because we have to address the issues. And the root of the problem is we have lost our moral bearing. And until we realize that, we can try everything in the world, we're not going to recover.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, well, in my copious spare time, I'm an officer of the executive committee of the Southern Baptist Convention,
Yes.
which is, not a big deal or anything. It's just the largest Protestant denomination in America. And why they would let me do that, I have no idea. And I'm quite certain there are quite a lot of people who want rid of me. Nevertheless, this is near and dear to my heart. And I would start with exactly what you said. People want the truth. They want it unvarnished. Our churches seem to be entertainment venues increasingly. That is highly problematic. You can never outworld the world, for starters, and people are looking for something different or they wouldn't have come to your church. And I'm not going to talk about musical styles and all that, to each their own. I'm just going to say that if you were going to build any mass movement, any mass organization in all of history, what would be the first thing that would leap off the page at you about them? And it would honestly be that they call you to sacrifice and do something hard. I mean, if you look at, I don't know, pick anything. If you join the army, what are they going to tell you? You're going to be an army of one. You're, the few, the proud, the Marines. If you were going to join a gang, they would make you go through some horrifying gang initiation. People flock to these things because they're looking for something that isn't easy and is actually a solution in the world. So when the church tries to make it all easy believism, they're completely self-defeating. Jesus said, take up your cross daily and follow me. So the church is really blowing it when we try to make this way too sensitive. We ought to be telling the hard truths that Jesus told, and we ought to be demanding more of the person in the pew. And I would go to my second point on that, which is exactly the same as what the left is doing politically. They're out there door to door. They're organizing neighborhoods. They're finding the people who are not just lost in the spiritual sense, but lost in the community sense. People who want to plug into something, who want to be part of something, who feel left out, who feel ignored, who don't feel seen. If anybody in the world ought to be doing that, it's the church. And that's the essence of the Great Commission. Yeah. And as in so many other things, the world is doing a better job of the church's mission than the church is doing.
Yeah,
we have to reverse that.
Real quick, GK, because the Sunday school teacher just kicked in on me. When Jesus said, pick up your cross and follow me, I can promise you 50, 60, 70% of Christians think that, oh, that's my burden. I have to carry my burden. The cross in Jesus' time was the death penalty.
Yeah.
If Jesus was going to say that today, he would say, grab your lethal injection, sit down in your electric chair and follow me. What he's telling us is we have to die to ourselves every day. Get over yourself and and strive for something bigger and better. You know, the thing about a Christian marriage, I know with Rod and Sherry and my wife and I, when we love Jesus first and we sacrifice for each other, your needs are already met. You don't even have to worry about your needs being met, because your needs are being met by the one who loves you, who you're committed to. And you're meeting her needs, she's meeting your needs. And the church does that as a family. We meet each other's needs. If somebody in our church is going without, it's because we don't know. We really don't know that.
Exactly.
You know who we tell you know who we go to, Rod, to get so we can find out? The kids. The kids know. The kids
They do.
know.
And they'll talk.
The kids know and the youth know who's having a hard time, because kids will tell each other. So we tell the kids, hey, if you know a family that's struggling, come let us know. We'll love up on them and we'll help them out.
But with the other thing that take up your cross daily can't help but mean, and you'll rarely hear it preached this way, but it's obvious. You know, Jesus is talking in an environment in which the Jewish authorities are routinely excommunicating people if they believe something other than the orthodoxy put out by the Sanhedrin, in an environment where the Romans are actually crucifying people for defying Caesar. And Jesus is saying plain as day, stand up for the truth. And if you get killed, you get killed. There's a reward in heaven. There's a judge in heaven. He'll sort it out. And, be courageous. One of the things that honestly I have found the most disturbing about the reaction of a lot of Christians to COVID has been just the abject fearfulness.
Yes.
We as Christians are known historically for rushing into places where there are plagues and all kinds of horrors to try to give relief. And here we're letting grandma die of COVID alone in a room because, oh my gosh, we might get it. Well, if it were actually killing, the kind of percentage that the Spanish flu did, well, okay, you might have a case for that. But actually during the Spanish flu, Christians were rushing in.
Yeah.
And now they're hiding in a closet. And it just floors me how worldly focused they are. They are clinging to their physical life at the expense of people's immortal souls. And it suggests that they aren't as attuned to their own immortal soul as previous generations of Christians were, and certainly as Christians are in many parts of the world under more persecution. The sad upshot of that is we are already facing persecution in America that everybody laughed at us for saying was coming 5 or 10 years ago, and it's about to get a lot worse before it gets better.
And the saddest thing, as it relates to Christians and to Jews and to anybody who's Black and conservative or gay and conservative or whatever, you will get pilloried if you are of any minority, if you happen to be a Republican or a conservative. And my attitude is Tim Scott stated his case very well a few weeks ago, really did. And I think it's a very, very sad thing that as America got so close to more racial normality, if you will, all of a sudden, here comes this political movement that is deliberately trying to put salt in old wounds. And I find that very, very disturbing.
And it's not even hypocrisy per se. They say flat out what they believe. Black is a matter of your political position, not your skin color. Right. Being a woman is a matter of your political position, not your sex. And they're absolutely clear about this. Critical theory in all of its subsets, whether you're talking about critical race theory, radical feminism, post-colonialism, queer theory, all of the different sub-flavors of critical theory get you to this same intersectional end where everything is designed to divide and put you in permanent animosity toward everybody else. And it just conveniently works out that the party will unite you and take care of you and fight off your evil oppressors and make all things well. It is, if you think about it very plainly, intersectionality, critical theory as a whole, and all of its subsets. Critical race theory is the one on everybody's tongue right now. But all of this is just Marxist Leninism repackaged for an American audience.
Yeah.
They couldn't sell class warfare. And so Gramsci, Gramsci in Italy and Marcuse more recently, they figured out, how can we sell this to a 21-year-old gender studies major? Well, we can start by having a gender studies major.
Excuse me, guys, I don't mean to be stepping on your lines, forgive me. But the fact is, to me, the biggest crime right now, if I had to pick one, is the fact that nobody in the mainstream media seems to have an ounce of courage to stick up for what's right. And I bet you an awful lot of them, deep down, if you gave them truth serum, they know what's right, but they don't have the guts to come out and change things.
Oh, it's terribly accurate. And you see that in all of our institutions. There are people obviously standing up here and there, but the majority cow before this. They're terrified of being called a racist. They're terrified of being canceled. Well, what is take up your cross and follow me, if not a willingness to be pilloried or canceled? I mean, that's nothing compared to scourging. And if we don't have some conservative and Christian and other religious people stand up to this, we will go into a Marxist night. They won't call it Marxist. They won't call it some of the things we're used to in traditional, frankly, communism. But that's what it is. They've merely changed the terminology. We don't have the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. We have the oppressors, the privileged and the oppressed. Okay, but it's all the same thing. And the theory works out the same way. And look at what their end game is in every case. The answer is redistribution of wealth.
Right.
It's exactly the same thing, just with different labels.
And the funny thing about that is that's really, when they say that, the wealth is coming from the middle class. It's not coming from the super elites. It's coming from the average guy making $30,000 to $90,000 a year. It's not coming from the John Kerrys. And the thing that bothers me tremendously is that we need to do a better job of letting people know that it is the middle class that supplies much of what this country is about. When you look at Western civilization, the French, when they were at their peak, the British at their peak, whatever, the middle class was very, very strong. Once you start losing the middle class, you lose what's best about your country to a great extent.
Well, you reduce the vast majority to a state of dependency.
Yep.
And if they are dependent, then they are malleable, they are puppetized, and the state can rule them. I mean, that's really the bottom line.
Government cheese is like heroin.
It is. It absolutely is. And the more you can break down the family, the more you can break down all of the other intermediating institutions, such as the church and civic groups and so forth that have existed before. Rival centers of power to the state in a sense, but in another sense, just virtuous attachments, things to which you have a loyalty other than the state. In every socialist system that is broken down, must be broken down, is the first priority to break down, because they want you to have nothing but the state. The state will, remember the town hall with Bob Dole and Bill Clinton, where the hippie guy stands up and says, I see the state as my father and mother. Well, that's exactly what they're trying to get you to the point of. It is going to take care of you in all things, and there's nobody else you can turn to.
Well, I'm gonna sum it up with this, because we've been going a long time, and I appreciate your time, Rod. But a very, very smart man, 2,000 years ago, and I believe what was his very last letter he ever wrote, his epistle, the Apostle Paul wrote this to Timothy, 2 Timothy 3. He wrote this probably about 1940, maybe 30 years ago. But know this, In the last days, perilous times will come, for men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. And from such people turn away. Now, that wasn't written just for our time. Every generation has claimed this passage in the Bible, saying, here we are. At some level, they're right. This has been going on too long. This has been handed down from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. We're 4 generations away from what was last called the greatest generation. And if we do not, we, the church, do not rise up and say, as you said, not yelling, not screaming, but say, no, no, no. Because like my pastor said about what went on in California, when Governor Newsom said, close the church, the minute you said, okay, that was consent. And you know that as a lawyer, Rod, he has a law degree too. Once you say, okay, you've consented. If you say no, and they come and arrest you, now you have a case. Now you have a case. And some of us need to get arrested. We need to say no, no more, no. And that's what they're doing across many of the states with transgender sports, with not allowing critical race theory. We're starting to say no, but we need to say no with backbone. And if it means getting arrested, if it means losing a job, then we may have to do that.
Yeah, there's a time for opposition, and sometimes that's very peaceful and merely verbal, and sometimes that's getting arrested, and sometimes that's something in between. And we have to have the courage and the willingness to stand for what we believe in. We have a lot of people who don't seem to believe in anything, but it doesn't take everybody. I mean, there were about 3,000 members of the Bolshevik Party when the communists took over Russia.
Right.
It didn't take tens of thousands or millions. It took 3,000 with a plan. And, you know, we aren't offering merely stop, we're offering a better future. The fact is that if you stop doing the destructive things that big city mayors, all of them Democrats, are doing, you could clean up those war zones like the South Side of Chicago, these horrible inner cities that are the product of a century of Democrat neglect and pernicious policies. If you want to get rid of the kind of violence we see in those places, well, guess what? My neighborhood isn't violent. We got cities all over this country, smaller cities to be fair, but cities that are run by Republican governments that are perfectly fine, that don't have the kind of death count that Chicago and LA have. There is a better way. There's a way to instigate people to go out and start small businesses and create jobs and build better futures. And all of those things start from those moral principles we were talking about. People tend to think of Christian morality as just be nice to each other, or maybe have something to do with sex or dancing or something. I am interested in people being sexually moral because I just for starters want them to have a good future where they, don't die of horrible diseases and leave wrecked families to be taken care of by the welfare system. But more than that, I would like them to actually pay attention to the totality of the system where we get off people's backs. We encourage people to be honest to one another so they keep contracts, and you don't need as many lawsuits, and you don't need as many policemen, and you don't have people killing each other, so you don't need huge prisons. All of the things, for that matter, we've been talking about prison reform and how easy it would be if we took a more biblical approach, which is focused on restitution to the victim instead of punishment by the state. In a technological era where we can track where people are, we could have those nonviolent offenders in the workforce helping make restitution and still taking care of their families at home. There are better ways to do all of these things. And our worldview provides that versus a socialist worldview that provides, oh, I don't know, Cuba and Venezuela.
Mhm.
So that is the great contest right now. There are two great worldviews contending and a bunch of mushy middle in between. And I assure you, one of those works, and one of those killed 100 million people in the last century. And I am not on that side.
Yeah. Well,
It was nice speaking with you again, Rod.
And we do
And
thank
you, GK.
we do thank having you on our show, and we'll be sure to have you back. And we're going to be following you. Everybody, make sure you go to his website, martinorganization.com, and just check out what Rod's up to. And he's a great resource. And you're still sending out your newsletter every once in a while, don't you?
We aren't right now. You can mostly follow what I'm thinking and writing on Facebook, but we'll crank that back up soon. We may even be launching a podcast in the near future.
That'd be wonderful. Let me know if you need any help getting that started. I'd love to help out.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Well, God bless you, Rod. Take care. Love. Send our love to Sherry.
Yes, sir.
All right. God bless.
You too.